I think for many of us, it's easy for examinations of consciences or becoming aware of maybe sins as we're walking to confession, and we can go through our to-do list, and it's easy to forget the words of Jesus when he says, "You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I've made known to you." So this whole journey we're making tonight is all about recognizing. It's not about figuring out what's going on inside so I can get my list ready for Father. It's about recognizing we're friends with Christ, and we want to renew that friendship. And that's what this is all about, that deeper relationship. Yet even here, God responds with mercy. This is right out of the Catechism. Gifts of garments of animal skins, the first sacrifice. So even in the midst of our sin, it's so important to keep in mind the gentleness and the mercy of God who meets us in our weakness. There's a lot of hurt going on in the world, and there's a lot of suffering. We hurt others, and others hurt us. We even see this in the story of David. That's in our first reading from this past Sunday. That beautiful line, "Not as man sees does God see," because man sees the appearance, but the Lord looks into the heart. The way that some of these wounds have been experienced in my life is the way that I can bring these into communion with God, because that's the whole point. The whole point of this life and our spiritual life is to bring everything into communion with God. To bring everything up on that altar and back into communion with him, so that we're not like our first parents, self-reliant, trying to fix themselves, trying to cover themselves, but we're bringing everything back into trusting communion with God. Even the places that we're ashamed of or afraid of, or that there's a lot of pain there. And then that wound gets insulated, that wound. We try and protect the places that hurt, right? That makes sense. If you have an open wound on your body, you bandage it, and you put a hand in front of it because you don't want anyone touching it. As soon as it gets touched, it's painful. So often when we have a painful moment, an argument with a loved one where terrible words are exchanged and hurt is caused, we try and protect that with a layer. And that layer is beliefs that we believe. And again, because that wound is often out of communion with God, guess what? We're not believing true things, we're believing lies. So we start to think things about ourselves and about others. So the things we believe about ourselves are lies. But I love this line from Isaiah, "By his wounds we are healed." Isn't it beautiful that Jesus allows himself to be wounded? And out of his wounds we are healed because he is in perfect union with the Father. Perfect union with the Father. That's a beautiful beginning place for when we experience a painful wound that often comes up because a memory is triggered or a person we run into. And then that wound kind of shoots up in us with some pain. We don't want to look at it, or we don't want to talk to them. By his wounds I am healed. What a beautiful thing to be able to say to ourselves in those moments. And I love it. So it's creation versus creator. And this is why the understanding of sinning out of these places of woundedness. Because we are choosing to go to creation to calm, soothe, escape from, heal our own woundedness, our pain. A tree is known by its fruits. So if the fruits that are coming out of me are bitterness, what's going on in the roots and in the trunk to produce the bad fruit? I never thought about it. And I'm not good enough. It's so funny. I don't know if we would necessarily catch that, but I know there are definitely certain attitudes in my heart in certain moments where I feel that, oh gosh, I'm just not good enough. I can't do this. And we don't even realize it's coming up out of us, and it's the air that's kind of where we're breathing in. It was the only thing I remember, and I think it was the only 16 of the time. We are not the sum of our weaknesses and failures or our wounds. We are the sum of the Father's love for us and our real capacity to become the image of His Son. You are a sum of the Father's love. That is who you are. The wounds, the brokenness, and the sin is what the Lord wants to recreate in your life into His glory and His goodness. But this is who you are. I love this image by Tissot of the blind man washing at the pool, right? I don't know how he got there because he was still blind and he had clay all over his eyes. But he got to the pool and he washed. It's so beautiful too. The divine poetry. What was the first thing he saw? It wasn't Jesus. Jesus wasn't there. It was his face. His own face. That is what the Father wants you to experience when you step out of confession, or you come out of Mass, and you've been cleansed of that blindness from sin and wounds, to see yourself the way He sees you. What a gift. What a gift. So forgiveness is at the core and the heart of the Sacrament of Reconciliation, where we experience these cleansing waters, and forgiveness is at the heart of our healing, of all healing. Because the mercy and the forgiveness that we experience in the sacrament is the mercy and the forgiveness that is going to set us free in our lives. Because forgiveness is at the core of all of our relationships, of all of our wounds. At all of our wounds and our brokenness and our sins is forgiveness. And our ability to take that forgiveness that we've received and to share it with that person that has wounded us. So I encourage you to keep this in mind the next time you go to confession, that this is what's really happening. You're reaching up to receive the mercy of God, the forgiveness of Christ, pouring forth from His heart on the cross, who knows suffering, who understands wounds and hurt and pain and the sorrows of this life.
We don't get a lot of details overtly about King David's life, nor the man born blind. But in both stories and in the lives of those figures, we can figure out enough from the scriptures that those around them didn't expect a whole lot from their lives. And part of it was, the burdens that they carried from the wounds that other people had inflicted on them, other people's sins. Sometimes it was their own sin. You look at David's life, and it's really a mixed bag of wonderful leadership and a lot of things, a lot of good things, and also some massive failures. The Lord comes to us, and truly, the promise of His redemption really is infinitely better than anybody's expectation of what their lives would have been, or their own expectations of how lives should have been. God's redemption of the most broken places of our lives is always going to be infinitely better than what we could have dreamed of.